Hello everybody, and welcome to this, my first of 3 videos on the Sigma SD9, a very exciting, very vintage digital SLR. The Sigma SD9 is an interchangeable lens DSLR. What that means is you can take the lens off of the front here and put a different one on at any point when you're not taking a photo without messing up your photos. It has an APS-C-format 3.4 megapixel sensor that uses 10.2 million pixels. So it's a little bit confusing here because it has a Foveon sensor. So it has 10.2 million pixels, which would normally be a 10.2 megapixel sensor, but it creates a 3.4 megapixel image because it has 3 layers of sensor stacked, and the 3 sensor layers are sensitive to different colors of light. So the Foveon sensor is a different technology than CCDs and CMOS sensors because it allows the light to pass through the sensors, and then each pixel has an actual and correct color value for it instead of using algorithms to interpolate data. The SD9 has an 8-segment evaluative meter with center-weighted and center-weighted averaging metering options. It has shutter speeds of 1/6000th of a second to 15 seconds at 100 ISO, and 1/6000th of a second to 1 second at 200 and 400 ISO. Also, it has a bulb mode setting, but that's limited to 15 seconds at 100 ISO. It provides a 1.9 frame per second burst speed with your image size set to high and a 6-frame buffer at high. If you are set to medium and low, then you get 2.4 and 2.5 frames per second respectively, and a 14 and 30 frame buffer respectively. The viewfinder on the camera has a magnification of 0.77x and a frame coverage of 98% horizontally and 97% vertically. So what that means is that if you look through the viewfinder, what you see in here is going to be 77% of the size of what's going to be on your APS-C format sensor. That's really very small. For autofocus lens use, not an issue. For manual focus lens use, it's kind of a challenge. The viewfinder frame coverage, 98% horizontal, means that about 1% of your, if what you're looking at right now is what's going to be on the sensor, then about 1% on each side and 1.5% on the top and bottom will be on your sensor, but not in your viewfinder. And that means that and that's pretty good coverage, and that means that if you fill your frame in the viewfinder, you still have a little tiny bit of room outside of what you see in your viewfinder for image editing and cropping. The ISO range on the camera is 100 to 400 in full stops, meaning 100, 200, and 400 are your 3 ISO options. The flash sync speed is 1/180th of a second, and it has, as we mentioned, a Foveon sensor with its 3-layer light recording capabilities, and they are billed by Foveon, of course, as being better. Now, I have not yet shot this camera. I do plan to do a full video review as well as a manual on this camera, which means I will get to shoot it. I am looking forward to seeing how a 20-year-old Foveon sensor performs. This also has a very interesting feature I've never seen on any other camera. You might see here there's a glass panel, and this is a dust prevention panel. So the dust that would normally fall on your sensor lands on here. I'm curious, when I start shooting this camera, as to whether or not over the course of the last 20 years there has been other dust that's made its way past here and has gotten onto the sensor, because if so, that is going to be an absolute nightmare to clean. The target market for the Sigma SD9 was the professional shooter. Now, despite that, by today's camera standards, it has very low-end specs, but when this camera was released in 2002, it was a professional-grade camera. All DSLRs at that point were still professional-grade, very expensive cameras. The Foveon sensors that this has, or Foveon in general, have also always been kind of niche sensors for photographers really interested in the look that they provide. It was made by Sigma in Japan from 2002 until 2003. It was preceded by nothing. This was Sigma's first ever DSLR, and it was concurrent with nothing because while Sigma made this, they only made this DSLR. And it was followed by the SD10. So if you have your Sigma SD9, what we're going to do is go through the camera's features and functions. So starting here on the sides are the strap lugs. This is what you would connect your camera strap to. Metering mode button, function button, autofocus button, drive dial, indicators for the resolution and the ISO buttons, flash hot shoe, diopter adjuster, shutter speed adjuster, shooting mode selector, indicators for the auto exposure lock and exposure compensation buttons, LCD screen. This is called the command dial. So the dials have different designations. This is the drive dial or D dial, shutter dial or S dial, command dial or C dial, and shutter release button right there. On the camera's front, we have the lens release button right here, the lens mount right here, electronic contacts, depth of field preview button, remote infrared remote sensor, Foveon badge, make, model, lens mounting index on the top. Some Sigma SA mount cameras can take Pentax mount lenses. Can this one? Let's find out. I mean, I already know the answer to this, but let's find out. Nope, it cannot. And the reason is because of that dust guard and the K-mount aperture linkage right here. If I took that dust guard out, could it? I honestly don't know. I might try that. If I have to clean that sensor, if it is in fact dusty, I'll find out. On the camera's back, we have a whole bunch of stuff here. Resolution button, ISO button, viewfinder, auto exposure lock button, exposure compensation button, plus and minus for zooming in and out on playback and things like that. That's what it does. This is its job. Menu, view, which we would now today call playback button or play, info button, mod or modification or asterisk button. It's called the mod button. Delete button, LCD screen. This is a light that lets you know the SD card is being written to. There are a couple of indents here, and then on the bottom, and those were for an LCD screen protector. That is really gross, whatever that dirt in there is. That came with a camera and that protected the screen. OK button, cancel button, control pad. This is the CF card release switch. So push that, and now we can get into the CF card. On this side, we have the CF card port right here, and we'll talk in video 2 in detail about the CF cards for this camera. We also, down here, have the cable release socket. I did actually get it off of this camera. I take that back. It's just a little headphone jack looking cable release socket. Over on this side, we have a ton of different stuff. Okay, we're going to start underneath this cover. So these are different ports that this camera includes. Up here, this is IEEE 1394, which is called Firewire. And this stuff was amazing back in the 90s and early 2000s. Way, way better than USB was. That's your USB 1 port right there, mini port, very slow. Firewire was significantly faster. Whatever happened to it, I don't know, because I stopped selling computer gear before Firewire was discontinued. That's how long ago I was a computer salesman. Anyway, USB mini port, that's definitely USB 1, very, very slow transfer rates. Video out port, that is an auxiliary video out, and was for older analog TVs and monitors. DC in, if you have the DC adapter, that's where you would plug it. And then here, on this side, this is the lock release for the AA battery chamber. On the camera's bottom, we have the tripod socket, the serial number, registration stamps, and the CR123 battery chamber right here. That's right, this camera takes 2 different kinds of batteries. So, some things not to do with your camera. You don't want to let it get wet. It's not weather sealed. It is completely electronic. Getting wet will absolutely destroy it. You also don't want to leave it in a plastic bag or box without a rechargeable desiccant pack for fear of moisture ruining it. And just remember that your Sigma SD9 is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. And as long as you take care of your camera will take care of you. So that is it for video 1. We've looked at what everything is. In video 2, we're going to talk about how to use everything in this camera. Except, do I have a video 3? Yeah. Except for the menus. And in video 3, we'll go through the entire menu system and talk about how to configure the menus in this camera. See you in the next video.